What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Better You Project, optimizing health, hormones, and aesthetics. And today we have a repeat 3 times guest. This is Dr. Leonard Pastrana coming out of West Palm, right? Florida.
Yeah.
And he has been on our episodes for quite some time. If you go back to like the very early beginning, we did our first podcast together, I think almost like 2 years ago. And we talked about peptides. We went into semaglutide and all just some of the peptides. Well, unfortunately, here we are in 2024, and some of our lovely peptides have been snatched away from us. And so we're going to talk about some of the amazing alternatives that Dr. Pastrana and his team have put together to kind of help meet some of the demands of our gut patients and our weight loss patients. He, as well as his business partner, have also put some great tools and resources together for practitioners to help get their practices up and running, from building out a practice for peptide and how to incorporate that into practice. So Leonard, let's go ahead, give us the update. So where are you now? So besides speaking on stage and being the creator of all kinds of fun things, give us the update.
Yeah, so first of all, it's great to be back on. One of my favorite podcasts to be on. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
But we've been just doing a lot of the same stuff. We're just trying to do it a lot better. Some of the things that we've been up to is, we really think, I'm a pharmacist, of course, so we love the idea of compounds and supplements and how those can work. But what I'm a little bit obsessed with is tracking that. Like, how do we know what we're using is actually moving the needle? How do we know what we're using is actually working? And some of the side projects that we've been working on is working on our lab where we get to kind of test all this stuff out. So longevity assessments are really interesting to me. I love looking at being able to track how somebody is changing or how we're improving them, and not just with like a DNA test. All those things are pretty cool, but looking at things like metabolic breath analysis, like measuring VO2 max, of course, body composition stuff. We have a lot of new machines where we're measuring people's stability and their balance and their strength, because we believe that these things are really the big indicators of mortality risk, because that's where the studies are at when it comes to mortality risk. And without making it sound so horrible and calling it mortality risk, that's really how we judge if we're helping somebody's quality of life and how they how we can improve their health span. And so that's one of our side projects that we've been working on. And we love showing that data and what we're doing to practitioners, because that's our main audience is medical practitioners, and helping them understand, what's available for them to use. Not only what compounds are there to use, but how do we assess that? How do we look at if we're really moving the needle? And that's what's been our main project, is kind of creating that platform for practitioners as to not only fulfillment with prescriptions and supplements, but more of like a knowledge base on how we can help not only the providers. Because the providers can only do so much. And this is something that you're great at, is you're great at teaching your staff. That you can only do so much yourself. But you need to really instill all your knowledge into your staff so that they can go out there and make an impact also. And so we wanted to create kind of like a hub where practitioners can not only learn, but their staff can learn and have more resources, so that we can do what we're all trying to do here. We're all trying to do the same thing, is that's just optimize patient outcomes, help people live their best life. And so doing a lot of the same stuff, just trying to do it a little bit better.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's so good. So, let's jump into some of the nutraceuticals. So nutraceuticals, we always say there's pharmaceuticals and there's nutrients. I think nutraceuticals is the bougie word for supplements, okay?
Yeah.
So nutraceuticals is one of the big things that I personally love about working with New BioAge. They're always very innovative. And when you look at it down at a cellular level, it just makes sense. So first kind of nutraceutical we're going to talk about. So we carry a supplement in our practice called Perfect Aminos, which is by a company called Body Health. But kind of the another kind of like in maybe the same world, but just slightly different, would be something called iCell water. So this is something we picked up, I don't know, maybe last year at some point. I think, when, the peptides kind of went away, but it's been a great addition to our practice. So iCell water kind of came about. How I use it in clinical practice is I use it for a lot of different reasons, especially when patients are on that GLP-1 or the GLP-1 GIP. It's like not only are they suppressed with their appetite, but their quench for thirst is also suppressed. So this is a great way where they can get a little bit of amino acids in there, a little bit of creatine in there. And this can be a great adjunct therapy to some of the other supplements we use, like Lucinergy. So tell us a little bit about iCell water and kind of like how that came about.
Yeah, sure. So iCell water was actually kind of a concoction that a lot of us were making, a few years ago, and it really started with physicians that were helping train, high-end athletes, because they were going through extensive training, and so they wanted to protect their muscle mass and they wanted to protect their protein synthesis and their ability to train really hard but still maintain that muscle mass. And so one of the things that we were doing was getting specific amino acids, and it was very tedious, and this is why we would recommend it to patients, but it was very tedious because you'd have to get 4 specific amino acids, mix it with a specific amount of creatine, and mix it into 2 liters of water and drink it slowly throughout the day. And it was very beneficial, but it was kind of more niche down, and it was really hard to get patients to do that. The other thing that we were looking at is that there's so many things when you can improve the hydration of the cell. And so we were looking at it post-COVID when we were thinking of ways to inhibit viral replication. And one of those things is that if you can improve the volume of the cell, you can actually inhibit viral replication. So there was a number of very specific use cases. But to your point, when we realized this is something that we really needed to put together was when there was this mass adoption of using GLP-1s and Ozempic. And then there was this big misconception that people were losing muscle mass because of the GLP-1, which wasn't the case. People on GLP-1s were losing muscle mass, but it was for a number of different reasons. First of all, they were, and they were eating a lot less protein.
They're preaching to the choir. Yep, go ahead.
A lot less protein. They were skipping meals. And like you said this already too, is that one of the things that GLP-1s do is they reduce thirst intake, right? So people were drinking a lot less water, on top of the fact that when you're eating a lot less calories, there's a lot of water in food. So there was this big, dehydration thing that was happening. And this is why we developed iCell water, to make this a little bit easier for patients to stay hydrated. It was better than saying, hey, just drink a little bit more water. What we were trying to do is we were trying to improve intracellular water, because when you can increase intracellular water or improve the volume of the cell, actually has a lot to do with protein synthesis and has a lot to do with anabolism and protecting muscle, because that's why people were losing muscle on GLP-1s, is that they had this dehydration, this movement of water into extracellular space, and then you were actually inhibiting things like protein synthesis. And so this is when we decided, hey, this is something that we really kind of need to put together and make it a lot easier. And so what we did is we combined these amino acids, and there's a big kind of confusion where people think that this is a similar supplement, even though it's amino acids, to other amino acid supplements. That's not what we're trying to do here. We're not trying to improve, amino acids or building blocks. I mean, we are doing that at the same time, but this is specifically designed and formulated to improve cellular hydration. And so even though we're using amino acids, we're using specific amino acids that act as osmolytes. And what that means is that it draws water into the cell. And that's why we use creatine, because creatine is another thing that draws water into the cell that protects muscle. And this has been a great addition to GLP-1s. Anybody that's exercising a lot, anybody that's training, there's just about any reason you want someone to stay hydrated, but we've seen some pretty tremendous results. Again, in looking at the assessment, are we really moving the needle? Are they getting on the in-body? Are they maintaining muscle mass? Can we get someone to lose weight and increase muscle at the same time? Absolutely, we can. And we have the case studies to show it, and we present on that a lot using iCell water.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's awesome. And one of my favorite reasons to use it is my patients who are like, oh, I'm just not hungry or I'm just not thirsty. I'm like, okay, well, hope you like iCell water, because that's not what you're drinking. So dosing on that, typically 1 scoop a day. But I remember when you and I were kind of chatting about it, right when it was coming out, is you're like, you got to make sure you mix it with at least 64 ounces of water, right? I feel like that piece of it is absolutely crucial. And so I was like, so that means I can't mix it in like a little shaker bottle? You're like, no. Full jug. And then luckily I won the big new BioAge jug. So I got a big old drinking water thing. So that's great. That's awesome. Anything else about iCell? One thing I wanted to point out, what I do also like about iCell as a big practice who does a lot with gut health. So yes, there are some amino acids in there. There's a creatine monohydrate, but something that's in there also is L-glutamine. And L-glutamine is amazing for gut health, which is going to segue into our next thing. But L-glutamine is really good. Way I describe it to patients is like when you you grout, listen, and you know damn well I don't grout no tiles in my shower. But if I were going to, L-glutamine is like the sealant you use in the grout. It kind of helps bridge back some of those little tight junctions in the gut to kind of help with some of that gut permeability, right? So anyway, there's another shameless plug for gut health. So that's a great one. The next nutraceutical that I absolutely want to touch on is the Guttides. So again, not to get into too much detail, but some of our favorite peptides were ripped away from our cold dead hands. And so there is a peptide combination that we use all the time in our practice because we do so much gut health. We do so many GI maps because in functional medicine, it all starts in the gut, right? So Guttides is a combination of two of our very favorite peptides, BPC 157 and KPV. So this comes in a capsule. Leonard, do you want to talk a little bit about what BPC does and why, and then the KPV?
Sure. So, like you said, everything kind of starts in the gut, and I'm more of somebody that's always focusing on metabolism, and I was almost like, yeah, everything, everything starts in the gut. I get it. But then I realized in doing a lot of research in metabolism that I kept on running into the gut and running into, if the gut is inflamed, it's a very poor environment for metabolism. And I don't care how great your metabolism is, if you don't control systemic inflammation, you're not going to get anywhere.
At that moment where you're like, that fucking Lexi was right. God damn it.
Yeah, there was you and a couple other ones that have been really telling me this that I was like, I guess it wasn't just a saying, or it wasn't the cool thing to say. It really does. I mean, even when I'm studying certain metabolites like NAD precursors, I'm realizing when you get into the details, they're actually changing the microbiome, and that is what actually is eliciting a specific effects when it comes to metabolism. So it kept on popping up. It was just one compound, and then another compound, like one of your compounds that you talk a lot about, 5-amino. Like 5-amino, you're thinking about NAD and metabolism. You should see what 5-amino is, the studies that they show of what it does to increasing specific bacteria that is conducive to good metabolism. So I'm like, okay, fine. They win. It really does.
See, I knew it the whole time. I knew it the whole time.
Yeah. And so BPC, of course, is a peptide that's found in the gut that is naturally occurring, that has everything to do with systemic inflammation in a number of different ways. When it comes to improving mucus secretion, when it comes to wound healing, a number of different aspects. When it comes to BPC, it's so widely used. But the combination of that with KPV is where things get really interesting, because KPV is specific to the intestine. So one of the things you want to do with decreasing inflammation is you want to decrease all these things that stimulate these and what we call inflammatory cytokines. And what's in control of that is something called TNF alpha. And this is a main target for some of those really nasty like drugs like Humira that really target TNF alpha, but everywhere. What's cool about KPV is it targets specifically in the intestine and specifically in colonocytes to reduce that inflammation there. And so this combination is something that we've seen a lot of practitioners utilizing, especially in the acute phase of any type of inflammation, any type of bowel disease, any type of food insensitivities, anything that's affecting the gut. And so it's a great combination. I think I remember texting you, hey, what are you using BPC for? And you gave me a long list, because I know all the things that BPC does as a pharmacist perspective, like cellular pathway wise, but where I really get the great information is to see where someone like you is utilizing it. And you had a pretty long list, and that made sense to me after understanding all the mechanisms of how BPC was working.
Yeah. So as a clinical perspective, again, as someone who does a ton with gut health, some of my favorite cases are patients with insufficiency dysbiosis. So what that means is they have like an undergrowth of certain bacteria and an overgrowth of certain bacteria. So as much as I would love to hit it with like antimicrobial herbs with like, oil of oregano and cat's claw and berberine and all these things, unfortunately, those are the patients that are going to have the die-off because they don't have enough of the good bacteria to kind of help support the colonocytes and the short-chain fatty acids and all that stuff. So I actually love using BPC with KPV because KPV can actually be a little bit of an antimicrobial. It can be an antifungal, which Candida can be so hard to treat. Then pairing it with BPC, it's like thunder and lightning. It just works so well. So that's one piece of it. The other piece that I do very, very well is aesthetics. So I think about my patients who have got rosacea, patients with acne, and then KPV specifically with my psoriasis patients. So I have a patient right now where we're seeing some significant improvement in, she's got plaque psoriasis in her hair and on her back, and she's a kid. And this has been such a good combo. So she takes the Guttides as well. Some other things that I think KPV can be super helpful for is we're seeing this long haulers syndrome. So KPV can actually be super, as well as BPC, but KPV can be also really helpful from a neuroprotection and just kind of just decreasing some of the inflammation. I'm sure you probably understand it way more in depth from a neuroprotective mechanism than I do, but it is another piece that I've seen BPC KPV with a little bit of methylene blue for this post-COVID like crappy brain where I walked into the Kroger, I forgot my list on the counter, and I don't remember nothing that was on the list, or Publix if you're in Florida. So I love it. It's so good. I don't see any side effects, and I can't say that for a lot of things, right? I don't see any side effects with it. I'm sure they probably exist. I just don't see them. So I think it works extremely well, extremely well. I don't know. I feel like it's like if I, stranded on an island, I feel like BPC KPV is like the army Swiss knife. It's just like it kind of does a little bit of everything. So I think that's really good, really, really good. Is there anything else, Leonard, that I'm like forgetting about it?
No, I think you hit everything. It was just this overarching theme of reducing systemic inflammation anywhere from intestinal lining of the gut to immune cells, and the impact that can have. For our medical practitioners, it's something that they like to add when they're doing other things with people with food insensitivities. I know lorazepam is another really great peptide that we utilize this together with. So they really go hand in hand because they're protecting that lining of the gut. Butyrate supplementation. So we're really converging on the same pathways with all these compounds. And it's a really great strategy, and that's what we see working for physicians out there.
Yeah. One thing I would add, like tributyrate, I think is great. One thing that I've also seen work really well on a GI map too is when patients are, so this is your world, metabolic dysfunction, poor metabolism is a low level of akkermansia. So I'm not sure if you've seen the research on it, but low level of akkermansia can help support the natural production of GLP-1s. And so I'm like a little bit of BPC KPV for you, a little bit of tributyrate, sometimes lorazepam, and then the akkermansia can be, and also because it helps build the mucin layer of the inner lining of the gut. So I think that's a great peptide. That was actually another they're right again type moment when I was studying apigenin. I was studying apigenin as a CD38 inhibitor, something that increases NAD or speeds up the enzymes that degrade it. And I was in the metabolism world, and I started looking into apigenin, and I'm reading through how apigenin increases akkermansia production, and how now this metabolism is again having to do with the gut. And so that was another one of those, to name another one with like the 5-amino-NMQ. Yeah.
And apigenin was another one where I was looking at it for something completely different, and we end up seeing that it improves akkermansia production. And so it happened again.
I know, you're like, that fucking Lexi was right again. I was. No, I'm just kidding. Well, I think those are like the two big ones. I always enjoy having you on my podcast just to kind of see what's new, what's happening. You and I are the king and queen of like random text messages like, hey, quick, look what I found. So it's always good to network with pharmacists like yourself. You and Frank, always so great to work with. So we have patients who listen to this podcast, and we have a ton of practitioners in our training academy who listen to it. So Leonard, if someone like a practitioner would like to get set up with a new BioAge account, what is the best way to do that from a supplement perspective?
Yeah, sure. So it's very simple. You just go to newbioage.com and they can register their practice. First thing you want to do is register your practice, and then you have instant access to wholesaling and information, affiliate stuff, things like that. We have a number of different strategies on how you can get to your patient. But the reason that it's so important to register is that now you're on our email list. You get instant access to our knowledge base, and that's tools and assets so that you can further help educate your patients, like patient education sheets, other tools that you can help educate your practitioners. So you'll have access to all that information, all the webinars, and all that's free. And we do have a higher level of membership that has some more perks with incentives and things like that. But very, very easy to start. Just register your practice at New BioAge.
Awesome. If there's a practitioner who would like to fill with your pharmacy, what is the best way to do that?
It's the same exact thing. So actually, when they come into that process and they register, that's when they get to have access to our network of pharmacies. So we send that right over, and then they have access to a complete network of pharmacies, depending on where they're licensed and what they're looking to do. So same exact thing, same process. Okay, awesome. Last question: where can people find you? Okay, so this is like I've gotten better at this. This is your Instagram handle. This is your website. Come on, don't fail me now. I know I've been trying to do this for 3 years, but I think I figured it out. So Instagram is at Leonard Pastrana. Okay. And so I don't know why it took me so long to realize that, seeing that it is my name, but Yeah, I'm really horrible at social media. I never get this right on a lot of podcasts, but yeah, it's at Leonard Pastrana. And
Okay.
you'll be able to find. I don't post much, but this year I'm planning on doing it. Which you will find is Lexi making fun of my shoes sometimes on there. Um, but yeah, I got to get better at social. I don't know how you do it. I really don't. You're incredible on how you can share so much information on a daily basis. It's great. It's inspiring.
Yeah. Min, just so you know, Min's like, ain't nobody care. I'm like, everybody cares how many pull-ups I'm doing. Okay. I'm just setting trends. I'm working on grip strength. Okay. I'm just trying to live forever and look the same way the whole time. Another Instagram handle that I want to mention that Leonard will not is his New BioAge Wellness Network. It's okay. I'm going to link it all. Don't worry, Leonard. I got you. I'm going to link it all in the show notes so people can find you. I'll make sure I'll tag you. But if you're a practitioner and you're wanting to get set up with setting up an account with him and just kind of learning from his network, that would be the handle is New BioAge. New BioAge Wellness Network for that as well. So, Leonard, are you speaking at any conferences coming up here? Maybe sharing a stage with someone in particular who is amazing. Yes.
Yeah, we have. What was it, in April? We are going to be in Cancun.
Okay, so what Leonard's not saying is Leonard and I are sharing a stage at Sunset Sea for BioT. We're going to be reviewing some peptides. I don't really know what we're talking about yet, but it's okay because it's going to be constant education and comedy. So that's always fun. Where else?
Yeah. After that, we are going to Peptide World Congress. So we're going to be talking about something pretty cool. I'm going to be talking about the triple agonist, right? GLP-1, GIP, and glucagon. So a new class of GLP-1 that's coming out. I'm excited for that conference. A lot of cool stuff's going to be spoken about there. And besides that, we'll just be going to a lot of different conferences. But those are the main speaking engagements so far. So looking forward to it.
Wonderful. Awesome. Well, it's always so good to have you on the podcast. I'm sure we will probably have you on at least 2 or 3 more times this year. And I think that's it. Anything else? Closing thoughts, Leonard?
No, I think we covered everything. I just really appreciate the opportunity to be on your podcast. This is the relationship that we have is what we're trying to kind of create on this platform. It's like, as pharmacists, we can research and study as much as possible, and we can let practitioners like you with all the experience in the world know the information as to how we're seeing it. But it's your experience and your experience with your patients, your feedback that you're getting, the results that you're getting that you share with us, that we can share with the community is what's really elevating medicine and kind of taking it to the next level. So we couldn't do it without practitioners like you. So thank you so much.
Oh, this is awesome. Well, thank you again, Leonard, for being part of the podcast and always giving some time to us to better everyone's knowledge that's involved. So it's cool.